Hello, hope you're doing great. This is Maria Rajan, your friendly software engineer. And in this video, we're going to see how we can make use of the object-oriented programming style inside of Python. So as we discussed in a previous video, using the object-oriented programming style, we could create a digital version of any object that we see in the real world. And in this video, we're going to create a digital version of a remote control. I have an AC remote here and a TV remote, right? So we're going to create a digital representation of a AC remote control and a TV remote control in today's video. In Python, in order to create a class, we make use of the class keyword followed by the name we want to give to that class. Since we are creating, a remote control, let's just call this class a remote control followed by, opening and closing braces and, a colon. So here we know that, like a class is just a blueprint, right? It's not the real thing. It's not an object yet. It is a blueprint for creating the object. So in this blueprint, in this class, we need to define the properties of this object, because an object by definition is something that has properties, right? So what would be the properties of, this remote control? So, like one thing that stands out in our, remote control example is, this remote control has got a color, this is white and this is black. So color is a property, and then it has buttons, right? So when you press a button, something happens. So if it's an AC remote, if you press it, the AC turns on. And if it's a TV remote, if you press a button, the TV turns on. So we'll just take these two properties alone, like for our example. So let's add these properties to this blueprint. Okay, to do that, we just need to create a variable, just as how we create a variable, like in the global space. Inside the class's indentation block, we just declare the first property that this class is going to have. So the first property is color, so we'll just initialize it to an empty string. And the second property that this remote control class is going to have is the functionality itself, right? So we'll also initialize it to an empty string. So we have made the provision for defining what has to happen by means of using this, a string variable. But we would need to have a function which we can call when you press the button, right? So let's define that function here. So very similar to how you define a function, in the global scope, inside of a class as well, we create a function by means of using the def keyword, def, and then the name of the function. Here we will call it button pressed, and then, like the open and closing braces and colon. And in addition to this, we need to mention the keyword self in between the braces as a argument to create a function that can get attached to the objects that you create from a class. We need to make sure that the self keyword is the first argument of your function. And the functions that we create inside of a class, we call them methods inside of Python. Now when the button is pressed, like let's define the function, okay, like what it's supposed to do. So we'll just have a print statement, self dot color and self dot functionality. So see, that self object, like that we are passing into this function, is being used to access the objects variables. Since the color variable and the functionality variable will be attached to the object that gets instantiated from the class, in order to use them, we need to make use of the self dot as a prefix to the variable. So when the button pressed function gets called, what's going to happen is it's going to print a statement saying this is, the color, whatever color, the black or the white, whichever we pass in, and remote, which does the functionality, like, and then the functionality will define it when we instantiate. All right, cool. This is the blueprint. Okay, so we have created a class. We have successfully created our class, but this is only a blueprint. It's not the real thing. We have not yet created our objects yet. Okay, this is just the blueprint, just the design of how an object of type remote control could be created. Okay, cool. So how do we now create an object which is of the type remote control? To do that, we just need to, like have a variable name which can hold the object. So since the first object that we are going to create is, this AC remote, so let's just call it AC underscore remote equal to, and then the name of the class which we want to instantiate. So basically that's our remote control class, opening and closing braces. That's it. So this statement has now created an object. Okay, now only an object exists, and an object of type remote control exists. Okay, and we can access it with this variable AC underscore remote. Now, how do we access or set the properties of this remote control object? To do that, we just need to say AC underscore remote dot. Okay, and when we say dot, you can see, all the different functionalities that are associated with this object are getting listed. VS Code is helping us with this code assist system, but you can see all the different properties that are being attached to the object. And you know for now, ignore these double underscore functionalities. They are called dunder functionalities. For now, we'll just ignore them, but just pay attention to the top three things that are listed. We have a button pressed, which is a function, and then you have color and functionality, which are the properties that we define. So let's set the color to be white, because AC remote is white color, right? So the color has been set, and then the functionality AC underscore remotes dot functionality. What does it do? It turns the AC on. That's it. So we have now, defined the properties of the AC remote. Like the color property, we have set it to white, and the functionality property we have set it to turns the AC on. Let's do the same thing with the TV remote as well. We'll create another object, the TV remote, right? So let me just copy the same thing here for saving some time, and we'll call the TV remote, right? And it is also of the type remote control. And here, the TV remote's color is black. So, let's just set it to black, and the functionality is turns the TV on, right? So that's what this remote does. So now by doing this, right, so this AC remote is the digital version. It's a digital object that represents the AC remote that I have in my hand, and this TV remote is the digital version of the TV remote that I'm holding in my hand. All right, so let's just validate it. Okay, let's just verify it. So at the bottom, after we have created both our objects, the AC remote object and the TV remote object, let's just say AC remote dot, okay, button pressed. Okay, so this is similar to actually pressing the button over here. Okay, so AC remote dot button press, what should happen? Okay, and similarly, let's just do the same thing for the TV remote as well. Also, the TV remote dot button press. Okay, let's run this code and see what happens. Let's just say Python and the name of the file. So when we call the button press function of the AC remote object, it does print this is white remote, which white. Oh, what has happened over here? Let me just go here. We have just made a small typo. We need to print the functionality. So I'm just printing. Previously I was just printing the color twice. So let me just change it to 1. Okay, now if we run this code once again, you can see that as expected, when we call the button pressed method of the AC remote object, you can see that this is white remote, which turns on the AC, right? And similarly, when we call the button pressed function of the TV remote, right, we can see that this is a black remote which turns the TV on. Perfect, right? So we have two digital objects programmed using Python. So cool, right? This is the power of making use of the object-oriented programming style. We get to, create real world objects inside the computer. And I hope this video gave a glimpse into, what all we could do with by means of using classes and objects. I hope this video was useful, and I will see you again in the next video. Cheers!